So I'm going to show you the bug in a minute, but let me first of all explain to you general concepts on bug research, right? First of all, are you even looking for bugs right now? Or are you just watching YouTube and learning new concepts on what bugs even are out there and how to find them? Or are you actually, actively looking but can't find any? Well, if you're not even looking, how are you going to find any, right? No matter how experienced you are, you can find a bug in an application. Don't have that limiting belief that you are not good enough or experienced enough to find a bug in an application. If I were to tell you what I have found in the wild for what kind of stuff I have found, you'd be amazed, because even a person that has had no cybersecurity experience beforehand could have been able to find that bug. Not with the CVE I'm going to show you today, that's pretty niche, but I'm going to explain the concepts, yada, yada, yada. Now, second thing is, where are you actually looking to find bugs? Are you looking on HackerOne and on BugProof, the highly competitive websites with such a lot competition that you just completely get overwhelmed and have to find expert level bugs? Well, not technically not, because they also have pretty low level bugs, but you get my point, right? They're super competitive. Or are you looking to find bugs for the sake of finding bugs, right? Are you doing it for the money because you're looking on HackerOne, or are you doing it because you want a CVE? Because that's pretty important. Because if you're doing it to find a CVE to put on your resume to eventually get a job in this field, which should be your goal, right? Goal shouldn't be to, do it for money, right? Because then you learn to hate it, and with anything that you do just for the money, you start to hate eventually. If you do it for the love of the game, first of all, you're going to make it in this industry because you have that edge over people that just do it for money. But if you do it for money, like I said, you're going to start hating it, and you're also going to be less likely to go more in depth and understand the application and how it really works to actually find bugs that would lead you to make more money. If you do it for the love of the game, just finding a bug is the reward, and money, if there's a bug bounty program, that's also nice. So my recommendation to you, if you're doing it for the love of the game, like I am, look at websites or at programs that aren't listed on bug bounty websites. Now, watch out for websites though, because if you manage to get an RCE, a command inclusion or a file upload, make sure you hide your identity and stuff, because if they don't have a bug bounty program, there might be a risk of legal action, right? But for desktop applications, which the CVE is as well, this usually isn't the case, because you download the application, you're doing everything on your computer, so everything's safe. Now, unsaturated areas would be, well, not web exploitation, right? Because there's lots and lots of videos on web exploitation on YouTube, and just lots of courses on there. Unrestricted, unsaturated ones would be Windows desktop apps, Windows privilege escalation, which will be the CVE that I found at 16, my first CVE, which I'm going to show you as well. Then iOS bugs, Android applications, and just API solutions, right? Those are the main ones, which still are pretty big fields, which you can spend eternity learning and perfecting your craft in, but they're super, in comparison to web exploitation, they're not competitive at all. Okay, let's get into the Windows side of things and showing you my bugs. So let me clear that. Now, first of all, I have to explain what kind of bug it is. It's a DLL sideloading bug. If you don't know what DLL sideloading is, or if you're not familiar with Windows privilege escalation at all, I'm just going to explain that real quick. Now, there are these things called DLLs, which essentially are binary files, which are libraries. If you know a little bit of Python, you can import libraries to then use those functions in your code without having to rewrite them from scratch, right? That's what DLLs are. It's the exact same thing, just that it's a file which then exports it, and it's a little bit more low level. Point is, executables or exe files, they use DLLs. They load those DLLs, so they import them, and they use those functions. Now, when a DLL gets loaded, you can specify in that DLL to execute code, because sometimes to have a function that is supposed to work in a certain way, you have to prep the executable in a certain way for that function to function, if that makes sense. So that's a legitimate like use case of a DLL. This is not like maliciously put there by Microsoft, but you can execute code if your DLL gets loaded into a process in the context of that process. So if that process is running at admin level privileges and you get a DLL, which you are not admin, but you wrote your own DLL, it's your own code, and you get this process, which is an admin process, to load your library, you can execute code as that process. So basically you have admin rights. Now that's the goal here. The thing is, how do you even get this process to load the DLL into it, right? There's this thing called DLL hell, like hell, like heaven and hell. You can go do some more research because I'm not like that good at explaining it. It's like my third attempt. So basically, there's like an compatibility issue on Windows where certain DLLs have certain versions, right? They constantly get updated, especially the Windows native DLLs, which are used to interact with the Windows operating system, for example, or just used for rendering stuff onto the screen. They constantly get updated. And if an application uses this current version of a DLL and suddenly that DLL gets updated, then downloading that application and having that new DLL would not work anymore because they aren't compatible anymore, right? Because it's configured to that old version of that DLL. How Microsoft fixed this is to ship your own DLLs, which would also be from Microsoft like signed. But you ship the old versions of the DLLs with your software, which are compatible. So instead of just having your single binary, you have a complete folder with certain DLL files in there that you would need or that your binary depends on to essentially run the binary. Yeah, exactly. So how Windows managed to implement this is by implementing a DLL search path. So in a binary, if you try to load a DLL, it first, like, unless you specify a complete path, like C users, test, desktop, and then have that DLL on the desktop, and it's always there. If you just do it dynamically with it just being test.dll, it's gonna look in certain areas to try and load that DLL to have that compatibility thing, right? So if you didn't ship that DLL with you, it wouldn't, just fail, but it would look at the next location and at the next location. And if it's eventually there, it will load it. Problem with this is if you have an application and it doesn't ship the DLL with itself, but it still depends on it and it's in some Windows folder, you could technically just put your own DLL next to the binary where it would first look, right? And rename it to that DLL that it would look for. So that's essentially how you trick the binary into loading yours instead of the other one. Because the first thing that it looks for is its own path, right? Its own folder that it's in. So let's say it's in C:test and the binary is in there. The first thing it will look for when trying to load test.dll, even though it is on the desktop in this case, it would be in C:test because the binary itself isn't there to check for it being shipped with the binary. That was a lot. Okay, that's basically how it works. So there's a certain path that the binary goes through to search for the DLLs. And you can check this with certain tools like Process Monitor. Yeah, like Process Monitor, right. Now, let's get to my CVE, right? And by the way, that's why C program files is not writable by every user, right? because you have privileged processes in there that you can start as the user, but you cannot write into that same folder, because if you could just escalate your privileges. The problem is if developers use other files or other folders than C programs or C program x86 that are writable, or that they forget to, protect so that they are not writable. So if you can write into those folders, then you have code execution, or you have escalated your privileges essentially. And that's the case with this application. Now, here we go. I've got this terminal right here. And as you can see, I don't know if you can read this. Oh, there. I don't know if you can read this at the top right here, but that's not the user I'm currently on. That's the test user. I can make this bigger maybe. I don't know how to make this bigger. Okay, maybe just plus. No. Okay, so I'm running as this user, which is a low privileged user. If you do whoami/priv, you can see it low privileged, right? Or whoami/groups. whoami/groups. My operating system is in German because I am German. So, but as you can see, there's no like NT30 system or administrators or anything like that. Right, so it's a low privilege user, right? Now, which by the way, you can just spawn a terminal as another user. I don't know if you knew that. Let me just show you. Like my user right here is Jonathan, but I can do run as, which is a native Windows binary, /user : and then test, so the user, and then what you want to run, and then you enter the password of that user, and then boom, you get a terminal. Camera died, you already know that, but then you get a terminal as a user, right? Okay, so let's get started. The thing is, with this specific software, which I found the CVE in, the software itself can only be run with administrative privileges. And how it handles that, or my guess at how it handles that, because I haven't reverse engineered it, I have only observed it running. My guess at how it handles that is the user that installs the software also gets added to some kind of register, which the binary checks to see if it needs to request higher privileges to run, basically. It's pretty weird, but if you try and run it as a low privilege user, which I can show you right here, it's the iTop VPN client, then just give it a second. It just didn't, there we go. As you can see, I don't know if OBS picks that up, but as you can see, we have the thingy, right? The user access control, because this is not an administrator, it can't run it. Right, so this has to be run with administrative privileges, and it is always run at a high integrity level. If I launch this with my current user, which again, it doesn't request like, what's it called? It doesn't request the UAC for some reason. Like I said, probably some register stuff to, Ja, mach die Tür doch zu, hä? Die Tür war genauso. Nein, mach die Tür zu. Okay, so my brother just walked in, so where were we? Right, so this gets launched without the UAC prompt, probably because of some register that remembers the user that installed this. But in this VPN client, there's this section called recommended. It's all in German, but I'm gonna translate it. This says recommended, and in this recommended channel, you can install new software, which if you click this button, it just installs automatically. Now, what I did was I observed this behavior, which I did not, record right here. But essentially what I did is I recorded all of the behavior of this VPN client or of this binary in Progmon. And that led me to discover that, while we are running the exploit, I'm gonna, just show you, because I don't want to install another thing just to show you that, oh, it's actually there, and then run the exploit and install another thing, because that would be way too much work. I'm just gonna do it while running the exploit right now. If my PC would stop lagging, there we go. Okay, so we got the exploit right here. So essentially what this does is, if we click install, it puts a installation binary which is run at high privileges or at high integrity, and it runs it at the context of the user, which has to be an administrator, right? Because this client has to be launched as an administrator, because it has, So the user that runs the client is an administrator, because the client has to be run as an administrator. Now, once you install this, the client puts a binary in a specific location that is writable to everybody on the computer, even to other users. And that binary looks for a DLL in its same path because of the path search order, and tries to load that. So we can just basically search for that path, put our DLL in there, and then that binary is going to load our DLL, which will be at high integrity, which will lead to privilege escalation. Also to account takeover, because remember, we are a low privilege account, and this is another high privilege account. So this is an admin account, this is a non-admin account. Once the admin installs something, this user right here can execute code as our user. Now, I hope that made sense in some way. Otherwise, if it did not really, I have a GitHub repo, which I'll link in the description, which explains it a little bit better. But right here we have the exploit and stuff, which actually I have to put in a writable or in a readable path for that user. Let me go to C users public. And then we can cd into here, cd into itop. Okay, now we have the DLL, which is precompiled, which is just going to, we're going to run the exploit. And first of all, I want to, show you the exploit. I don't know if I launch Notepad from there, if it's going to be in my session, so if I'm gonna see that Notepad, but if I just do this right here, boom. So this is a little batch script, which does what it's supposed, does the exploit, which this is the path that the thing gets put into, the executable. This is the path where the PowerShell script is supposed to lie, which is a UIC bypass as well, which, first of all, I need to turn off my antivirus because I didn't obfuscate anything. A UIC bypass is basically, if the user has administrative privileges, it's still, even if you run something in the context of that user, it doesn't have full administrative privileges. Like, my current user is an admin, and if I run cmd.exe just as myself, as you can see, is that if I do whoami /priv, I still don't have any privileges because it is at mid integrity. It's not at high integrity. So it's not run as admin, right? And basically a USC bypass, which I include right here, would take that and make it run as admin. It's basically like sudo, but for Windows. But you have to have some kind of exploit for it. So here we go. So this is the downloader directory. and it basically creates the directory, and then so after that, when we click install, the client itself just puts the executable in there if it's already created. What some clients do, or what some programs do, is if it's already created as a security mechanism, they know, okay, there's someone trying to exploit this, and then they create a new folder, which then you would have to guess, but that's also, guessable, whole different story. So basically what this batch script does is it just puts the DLL and the script at the correct location. That's all it does. And it also renames the DLL to textshaping.dll, which is the vulnerable DLL that is trying to be loaded. Now, we have our thing right here ready, and I don't actually know if they patched it or not, because I did report it to them, but they didn't acknowledge it as a bug. So this would be the first time to see if they patched it or not. If not, if they have patched it, I'm just going to play a video of the first time I found it. So let's do exploit.bat. All right, we have to provide the DLL. So everything has been copied successfully. Copying PowerShell script to users public. Let's see if that is actually there. Yeah, okay, perfect. So the exploit worked. And now if we click on install, which also I used this application to install the first time the time I developed the exploit, so I don't know if it's going to work with this one. But let's just see. Also, let's record this with this guy. We have iTop and then we have that. Yeah, okay, that's perfect. Now it's probably going to lag from here on out because they have like poor memory management and it takes up a shit ton of RAM. So maybe my voice is going to lag, so don't even worry about that. Yeah, click on install. As you can see, we have the path that we specified, VPN6, and then we have PDF setup.exe, which should try and load the DLL. Let's actually filter for DLLs that it didn't find. Or it could also just take some time for it to load, right? But in the meantime, let's do that. Okay, so that didn't work. So here's the video where I did it originally, which I also submitted to the CVF, like to Mitra, to the company that issues CVEs. Right, this is also my GitHub repo, kind of explaining it further, right? Also showing you which UAC bypass I used, but let's just look into the video. And the video is pretty poor quality because I did that on a VM on my $100 laptop. So please don't, as you can see, please don't kill me for that. Right here, I'm going to skip forward because it's just basically running the terminal as the low privilege user, and you can't really see even what it says, but it's basically proving that it is a low privilege user, and then just running the exploit. And then I install the screen recorder software, and bam, the PowerShell window opens up because the PowerShell script gets executed, and we pop a calculator. And I don't know if I show this, but right here you can even see it's executed of the but you can't really see it because, like I said, again, it's super poor quality, and I apologize for that, but that's how I submit my first CVE actually. Yeah, as you can see, it is executed as the as that user. Yeah, so that was my first CVE that I found, feel free to go check out the GitHub. And one final lesson is just, even though you think you, or even though this was a pretty high level, it was pretty low level. Like, it was pretty easy to find that. And it took me the first day of actively searching for a CVE to find this vulnerability, right? Because it wasn't too hard to figure out. But the lesson here is, go and look at programs regardless of you thinking, am I good enough to find vulnerabilities yet? Because there's a lot of simple shit out there, and I just recently found one which is pretty awesome. If you are in the Discord, you already know it, or you already know the teaser for it. I'm gonna have to wait the 90-day period for responsible disclosure, yada yada yada. But it's like an upload vulnerability, like a file upload, which just basically lets you upload a web shell just straight up. So there are some pretty stupid vulnerabilities out there, especially on like local systems, like local Windows systems and stuff. And yeah, do it for the love of the game. Don't do it for the money. And that's how you find your first CVE. I hope that was helpful. I kind of was just a yap fest, in my opinion. But if you learn something, that's great. Yeah. Look at my biceps before you go. Okay, there you go. That's it. Bye.